Billionaire calls Waitress uneducated. She silences the room in 5 languages. Waitress, you're uneducated. Why are you even standing here? The billionaire's voice boomed across the crowded restaurant, sharp enough to make silverware clink nervously on porcelain plates. All eyes turned toward the young black woman he had just insulted, her hands trembling slightly as she held a tray of coffee cups, unsure if she'd even heard him correctly. The room went silent. Even the clatter of dishes seemed to fade away. People didn't usually witness such blatant arrogance, and in that moment, it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She started, her voice steadying as if she had rehearsed this moment her whole life. Excuse me, sir, but let me ask you something. Are you certain that education is measured only by degrees or diplomas? The billionaire laughed, a hollow, dismissive chuckle that echoed across the high-ceilinged room. Please, sweetheart. I've built empires before you even learned to tie your shoes. I don't have time for philosophy. That was the exact moment she decided. She wasn't going to let him, and everyone else in this restaurant, think for a second that his arrogance could intimidate her. Her name was Aaliyah Brooks, and she had been working at the Gilded Plate, one of the city's most luxurious restaurants, for 3 years. 3 years of serving billionaires, CEOs, influencers, and celebrities. She'd mastered the art of reading a room, handling entitlement with grace, and keeping her head high even when people acted as if the world revolved around them. But nothing had prepared her for Dominic Thorne, the self-made billionaire with a reputation for cruelty disguised as confidence. Dominic Thorne had a presence that could freeze a room, tall, impeccably dressed, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to look through you like glass. He had just insulted her openly, in front of everyone, and the humiliation could have shattered her. Yet she didn't flinch. Instead, Aaliyah took a deep breath and began speaking. First in English, her voice calm but commanding. Sir, respect isn't earned through wealth or power. It's earned through actions. And if you judge someone by what you see on the surface, you're the one who is truly uneducated. A few patrons murmured in agreement, but Dominic waved them off, smirking. Cute. Do you really think words will impress me? Aaliyah smiled, almost imperceptibly, as if she had expected his skepticism. Then, with a subtle shift, she began repeating her words, this time in Spanish, her accent flawless and precise. Señor, el respeto no es y por la riqueza o el poder. Se mide por las acciones y juzga alguien por su apariencia, usted es quien realmente no está educado. The room froze. A few diners exchanged glances, recognizing the language, astonished by her confidence. Not stopping there, she switched effortlessly to French. Monsieur le respect n'y measure pas à la riqueza ou au pouvoir. Il s'y measure par les actions. Si vous jugez quelqu'un par son apparence, vous êtes celui que est vraiment inculte. Dominic's smirk faltered ever so slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his sharp features. The attention in the room had completely shifted. The diners were leaning forward, captivated. Aaliyah didn't pause. She continued, moving into Mandarin, clear and precise. Now, whispers were rippling through the restaurant. Phones subtly came out of pockets. Some diners were recording, others just staring, unable to believe what they were seeing. Finally, she concluded in Arabic, her tone almost melodic yet firm. The silence was deafening. Dominic Thorne, the billionaire who rarely lost control in public, now looked uneasy, his confidence cracking like fragile glass. The room, once tense with expectation, now seemed to tilt in her favor. People were no longer questioning her ability, they were in awe of it. Aaliyah lowered her tray gracefully, her eyes meeting Dominic's, unwavering. So, sir, perhaps education is more than degrees. Perhaps it's understanding the world beyond your wealth. The audacity, the elegance, the sheer intelligence, no one had expected it, least of all Dominic. For the first time in years, he found himself speechless, his usual arsenal of money, influence, and arrogance rendered useless. Then something happened that no one could have predicted. Aaliyah, sensing the shift, leaned slightly toward him and whispered in Italian, soft enough for only him to hear, La vera forza viene dal cuore, non dal conto in banca. The true strength comes from a heart, not the bank account. Dominic's eyes widened, not because he understood her words, but because of the confidence, dignity, and composure she exuded. It was a subtle lesson, yet it struck him harder than any business failure or public embarrassment ever had. Across the room, diners were murmuring excitedly, their whispers blending into a chorus of admiration. One elderly woman even clapped softly, a tear in her eye, while a young man behind the bar whispered, "She just schooled him in 5 languages, and she's barely flinched." But Aaliyah didn't gloat. She simply smiled politely, offered Dominic a refill of his coffee with the same grace as she always did, and moved on, leaving a room full of astonished people and one billionaire silently reevaluating everything he thought he knew about the world. Little did Dominic, or anyone in that room, know this moment would be the beginning of a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The encounter wasn't just a lesson in humility. It was the spark for a story that would shock, inspire, and touch thousands of hearts. And as Aaliyah carried her tray to the next table, she didn't just leave an impression on Dominic Thorne. She left a legacy of dignity, courage, and intellect, a reminder that true education is not about money, but about heart, mind, and resilience. The moment Aaliyah returned to the other tables, she tried to focus on her work, but the tension from Dominic Thorne's table seemed to cling to her like an unshakable shadow. Patrons whispered, stealing glances at the billionaire, who had been humbled in front of everyone, yet his gaze remained fixed, not on anyone else, but on her. Dominic sat back in his chair, swirling the half-finished coffee in his cup, as if it contained the answers to questions he had never dared to ask. He had faced boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, and media scandals, but never had anyone dismantled his arrogance with grace and intelligence. And now his pride, an unyielding fortress, was subtly crumbling. Aaliyah's shift continued, delivering orders and refilling drinks, her movements precise and effortless. But she could feel the weight of his stare following her every step. Finally, she leaned over a table to pour water for an elderly couple, only to hear Dominic's deep voice cut through the murmurs of the restaurant. "You wait a minute," he said, rising slightly, his tone less harsh now, tinged with curiosity. "I don't normally do this, but what are you doing later?" Aaliyah froze for just a moment. This was unexpected, not an insult, not a command, but a question from the billionaire himself. She smiled politely, hiding the flutter of nerves behind her calm demeanor. "I have my shift here tonight, sir," she replied smoothly, "and after that, I have class." "Class?" His eyebrows rose, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "You're still studying?" "Yes," she said simply. "I believe learning doesn't stop at any age or bank balance." Dominic's smirk returned, but it was softer now, less condescending and more intrigued. Something about her confidence, her poise, and the way she carried herself was unsettling, yet captivating. He had met countless ambitious people in his life, but Aaliyah's blend of intellect, humility, and fearlessness was rare, almost alien. The tension in the restaurant began to lift slightly as patrons returned to their meals, but whispers lingered. Cameras secretly clicked, recording the exchange that would likely go viral by the end of the night. Yet Dominic wasn't thinking about public opinion, he was thinking about her. Later, after her shift ended, Aaliyah stepped into the small staff locker room, exhausted but proud. She had handled the billionaire with poise, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that her life was about to shift dramatically. Meanwhile, Dominic Thorne was pacing in his private corner of the restaurant, his mind racing. He had never been humbled like that, and a part of him resented it, but another part admired it. In a city where most people tried to impress him with false smiles and shallow charm, she had spoken the truth without fear. The next day, a call came in from the Gilded Plate's manager, asking Aaliyah to meet with him in his office after her shift. When she arrived, she found Dominic waiting, not as a customer, but as a visitor asking to speak privately. "Ms. Brooks," he began, standing as she entered, "I'd like to apologize if my words yesterday offended you." Aaliyah blinked, slightly surprised. An apology from Dominic Thorne was almost unheard of. But she maintained her professionalism. "Sir," she replied carefully, "what you said was rude, yes, but I think there's a bigger lesson here for both of us." Dominic nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right, and I want to understand that lesson. You impressed me yesterday, not because you argued with me, but because you stood your ground. Most people are afraid to challenge me." Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, assessing him. "And yet, sir, standing your ground doesn't always make you right. True strength comes from understanding, not dominance." A subtle tension filled the room, one that was no longer hostile, but charged with curiosity and unspoken potential. Dominic seemed to hesitate, the carefully constructed walls of his ego cracking just enough for vulnerability to peek through. "I don't usually meet people like you," he admitted quietly. "People who aren't afraid to speak honestly, even when the consequences could be severe. Most see me and either bow or argue for personal gain." That's because most people equate your wealth with authority, Aaliyah said softly. But authority isn't always earned by money. Sometimes it's earned by character, wisdom, and courage. Dominic's gaze softened. For the first time in decades, someone had pierced the armor of his confidence without trying to manipulate him or flatter him. He felt a strange mix of respect, curiosity, and admiration, and something deeper he hadn't experienced in years: humility. Over the next few weeks, Dominic began frequenting the restaurant more often, but not just as a customer. He started leaving notes for her, small messages encouraging her studies, complimenting her intelligence, and occasionally asking questions in languages he knew she spoke fluently. Aaliyah noticed, but she remained cautious. She had dealt with wealthy men before, some kind, most selfish, but Dominic seemed different. Then came the twist. One evening, after closing, Dominic asked her to stay behind. He handed her a sealed envelope. "This isn't a handout," he said, voice unusually serious. "It's an opportunity. I see potential in you, a brilliance that can't be measured by your current circumstances. You're capable of more than you realize. Read this when you're alone." Aaliyah's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Inside was an invitation to a scholarship program sponsored by his philanthropic foundation, covering advanced studies abroad in linguistics, international relations, and leadership, fields she had always dreamed of pursuing but never thought possible. She stared at the envelope, heart racing. Tears threatened to spill over, not from sadness, but from the realization that her life was about to change in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. You don't even know me," she whispered, almost incredulously. "I know enough," Dominic replied. "I've never met someone who challenges me, inspires me, and commands respect without demanding it. You've earned this, not by pleasing me, but by being yourself." For the first time in her life, Aaliyah felt the full weight of her potential, recognized and validated in a way that went beyond money or status. She realized that her courage yesterday wasn't just about defending herself. It was the beginning of a journey that could redefine everything about her future. And as she looked up at Dominic, she couldn't help but notice something unexpected: a vulnerability hidden behind his power, a man who had mastered the world but hadn't yet mastered understanding the value of humility, compassion, and respect. Little did she know, this moment was just the first domino. Their lives were now intertwined in ways that would lead to heartbreak, triumph, and revelations neither of them could foresee. The billionaire who once called her uneducated had unknowingly set the stage for a story that would captivate everyone around them. A story of intellect, courage, and the unexpected ways human hearts connect. Aaliyah left the restaurant that night clutching the envelope, a mix of fear, hope, and determination swirling inside her. She didn't yet understand the full magnitude of what had begun, but one thing was certain: her life would never be the same again. Aaliyah didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on her bedside table like a silent promise, its contents screaming possibilities she had only dared to dream of. The scholarship, fully funded, prestigious, and international, was more than just an academic opportunity. It was a ticket out of her routine, her financial struggles, and the limits society had tried to place on her. Yet it also carried a question that weighed heavily on her heart: why Dominic Thorne? She knew billionaires didn't usually give away opportunities to strangers, especially ones they barely knew. Something about his motives unsettled her. Was this a genuine offer or some elaborate test? She thought back to the night in the restaurant, the way he had watched her, the subtle admiration in his eyes. Could someone like him really value authenticity over flattery? The next morning, Aaliyah returned to work, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, trying to act normal, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But whispers and glances followed her, like invisible threads. The staff and patrons had seen the billionaire's fascination, and though no one dared speak openly, the story had already begun to ripple through social media. Her first customer of the morning, Dominic Thorne, seated in his usual corner, alone. He looked up, offering a small, almost shy smile. "Good morning, Ms. Brooks," he said, voice quieter than usual, almost human. Aaliyah swallowed the lump in her throat and returned the greeting. "Good morning, sir." He waved off the honorific. "Call me Dominic. I feel like we're past formalities after yesterday." Her pulse quickened, but she stayed composed. "Very well. Dominic." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Mind if I join you?" Aaliyah paused. Something in her instincts screamed caution, but curiosity won. "Just a few minutes," she replied, setting down a tray. Dominic leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I didn't give you the scholarship just for academics," he admitted. I gave it to you because I see strength, resilience, and intelligence that money can't measure. But I also have a confession. This is personal. Aaliyah's eyebrows rose slightly. Personal? How so? He hesitated. I grew up with someone very much like you, bright, courageous, underestimated. She didn't get the recognition she deserved. And I've spent my life trying to make sure I don't ignore brilliance again. That's why I'm giving this to you. Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, the billionaire, the titan of business, was just a man with regrets and a desire to do right by someone he admired. She had expected arrogance, manipulation, or expectation, but this was vulnerability wrapped in generosity. Aaliyah accepted his words with a nod, trying to keep her composure. I appreciate that, Dominic. Truly. But I need to understand, is this scholarship truly unconditional? He gave a small, genuine smile. Unconditional. No strings attached. Only one request. Make the most of it. Don't let anyone, wealthy or otherwise, tell you what you're capable of. The weight of his trust hit her, like a wave. Tears threatened again, but she blinked them back. I won't disappoint you. I promise. Over the next weeks, Aaliyah's life transformed rapidly. She attended orientation sessions, met fellow scholars, and began immersing herself in advanced courses in linguistics, global studies, and leadership. Her natural talent shone in every class, earning her respect and admiration. Yet Dominic Thorne's presence lingered in the background, a reminder that life had thrown her into a story she never anticipated. Then came the twist no one saw coming. One evening, as she was finishing a late study session in the library, she received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Urgent, Dominic Thorne, personal request." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a scanned copy of a legal document, an urgent business matter involving a charitable foundation. Dominic's voice, recorded on a secure line, explained that a significant amount of the foundation's funds were being siphoned by a close associate, and the person handling the case at the firm had vanished mysteriously. I need someone I can trust, his voice said. Someone intelligent, discreet, and capable of thinking beyond the obvious. Aaliyah, I trust you. I need you to help me uncover the truth before it's too late. Aaliyah read the message twice. Her heart raced. This was no longer about scholarships or admiration. It was about real-world stakes, danger, and trust. She realized that Dominic hadn't chosen her by chance. Her courage in a restaurant, her intelligence, and her ability to navigate pressure had all marked her as someone rare, someone who could be trusted with secrets that could change millions of lives. She hesitated. Could she step out of her safe world of studies and internships to dive into high-stakes corporate intrigue? But then she thought of her family, her dreams, and the countless moments she had been underestimated. This was her chance, not just to prove herself, but to take control of her destiny in a way she never imagined. The next day, she returned to Dominic's office, prepared. He was waiting, looking unusually tense, a sharp contrast to his usually composed demeanor. Are you sure about this? He asked, eyes searching hers. I am, she said firmly. If you believe I can help, then I'll do it. But you need to be honest with me about everything. Dominic nodded. I promise. No half-truths, no filters. I'll tell you everything about the foundation, the theft, and the people involved. But be warned, once you step into this, there's no turning back. Aaliyah took a deep breath. Her life had already changed once, and now she could feel it shifting again, this time into a world of danger, deception, and power. Yet, for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt purpose. And as Dominic began explaining the complex web of corruption, manipulation, and betrayal surrounding the foundation, Aaliyah realized one chilling truth. The person responsible for the theft was closer to Dominic than anyone suspected. Her mind raced. The billionaire who had called her uneducated weeks ago now relied on her intellect, discretion, and courage. And in that moment, Aaliyah understood the real lesson of their encounter. True power isn't wealth, it's character, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. Little did she know, the next moves she would make in this unfolding drama wouldn't just impact Dominic's foundation. They would uncover secrets that could destroy empires, expose betrayal, and test the limits of trust between two people who had begun as strangers. Aaliyah's journey from restaurant waitress to scholar and investigator had begun. And as she looked at Dominic, a silent determination in her eyes, she knew one thing for certain. This story was only just beginning, and she would face it on her own terms, armed with courage, intelligence, and the heart that had never let her down before. Aaliyah leaned over the laptop, the dim glow of the screen illuminating her focused expression. Dominic sat beside her, tense, hands clasped tightly, as he watched her every move. The files they had received about the foundation were labyrinthine: emails, bank statements, contracts, and coded communications. Every piece pointed toward embezzlement, but the most troubling part was how deeply personal the betrayal was. "This doesn't make sense," Aaliyah muttered, scrolling through a spreadsheet of transactions. "These transfers, someone is manipulating the accounts, but it's not just anyone. It's someone who knows your schedule, your patterns, your decision-making. This isn't random, it's personal." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I've trusted almost everyone here for years. You're telling me someone I considered loyal is robbing me from the inside?" Aaliyah nodded, her eyes sharp. "Exactly. Whoever did this had access, authority, and intimate knowledge. That narrows it down to a very small group, and the shocking part is they might be closer to you than anyone suspects." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to believe it. Not them, they've been like family." Aaliyah's voice was calm, yet carried an edge of steel. "Sometimes family betrays the heart, not the head. You need to prepare yourself." Dominic stared at her, a mix of fear, disbelief, and a growing respect. "You're terrifyingly good at this. It's like you can see through the walls I built around my life." She gave a small, confident smile. "I told you, sir, I'm not uneducated. And I don't make assumptions. I follow evidence." Hours passed as they pored over documents, emails, and encrypted communications. Aaliyah's intuition, sharpened by years of handling difficult customers and navigating complex situations in her life, guided her through the maze. Every detail mattered: timestamps, phrasing, and subtle patterns in writing style. And slowly the truth began to emerge. "Here," she said, pointing to an email trail. "Look at this. Every request for fund disbursement goes through this account first. The signatures match your executive assistant, but the metadata, it's been altered. Someone knew how to cover their tracks." Dominic leaned closer, tension radiating from him. "I trusted them with everything. My schedules, my decisions, they had full access." Aaliyah's voice softened slightly. "And that's why this hurts. But trust can't blind you to facts. Whoever did this underestimated you and me." Dominic's eyes met hers. There was admiration there, but also a hint of vulnerability he rarely displayed. "I don't know how you do this. I've dealt with high-stakes negotiations and corporate espionage my whole life, yet watching you work through this, it's like watching a master strategist in action." Aaliyah blinked, slightly startled by the compliment. "I've had to navigate life carefully, sir. Not everyone who wields power does it responsibly. And some lessons can't be learned in classrooms, they're learned in moments like these." The room was silent except for the clicking of keys and the occasional sigh. Then Aaliyah paused, her finger hovering over a critical document. This is it," she whispered. "The account number, the coded instructions, it's tied directly to your trusted executive, Julian Harris. He's been siphoning funds systematically, and he covered his tracks beautifully." Dominic's face went pale. Julian Harris, his longtime executive, the man who had been like a brother, the one person he had relied on without hesitation. "No, it can't be him," he murmured. "Julian, he wouldn't." "Facts don't lie," Aaliyah said gently but firmly. "I know it's hard to accept, but he's the one. The question now is, what do we do next?" Dominic ran a hand over his face, eyes clouded with a mixture of betrayal and anger. "We expose him, but carefully. If word gets out prematurely, the Foundation's reputation, and possibly mine, could be destroyed. I need a plan, a strategy that neutralizes him without collateral damage." Aaliyah's mind raced. This wasn't just a case of theft, it was a test of intellect, patience, and nerve. We need evidence, unmistakable, undeniable evidence. One wrong move, and he'll disappear or cover his tracks further. We also need to anticipate his counter-moves. He's clever and desperate. Dominic's expression hardened. He doesn't know I'm onto him. Yet. And if we act wisely, we can ensure justice without public scandal. Aaliyah leaned closer, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Then let's make him reveal himself. We'll set a trap he can't escape from, and we'll document every step. By the time he realizes, it will be too late to deny it." Over the next few days, Aaliyah and Dominic worked in secrecy. Late nights, encrypted communications, and careful surveillance became their routine. Aaliyah's analytical mind dissected every action, while Dominic provided insider knowledge of Julian's habits and routines. The tension between them grew, Not romantically, yet not entirely platonic either. A mutual respect born of trust, intellect, and shared purpose. Then came the breakthrough. Aaliyah noticed a subtle anomaly in Julian's digital footprint, a transfer scheduled at an unusual time, routed through an untraceable intermediary. Using her knowledge of coding patterns and finance, she traced it back to a small offshore account, directly linking Julian to the stolen funds. Dominic stared at her, awe mixing with disbelief. "You did it. You found the proof." She nodded, resolute. "Proof is only half the battle. Now we confront him carefully, strategically. One misstep, and everything falls apart." The confrontation was inevitable. Aaliyah prepared a detailed dossier, every transaction meticulously documented, every signature cross-verified, every digital trace accounted for. When Dominic finally summoned Julian into the office under the guise of an urgent meeting, Aaliyah was ready, unseen but orchestrating every moment from a secure position nearby. As Julian entered, confident as always, Dominic's voice cut through the air like steel. "Julian, we need to talk." And in that moment, Aaliyah knew her life had shifted forever. From waitress to scholar to investigator, she had navigated courage, intellect, and emotion to uncover betrayal that no one else could see. But the most shocking part? Julian Harris, the man she and Dominic were about to expose, had no idea that the person who had humiliated a billionaire in a restaurant just weeks ago was the same person who now held the keys to his empire's survival. The stage was set. The trap ready. And Aaliyah, calm, intelligent, and fearless, was about to prove that true power comes from heart, mind, and courage, not wealth, titles, or appearances. Julian Harris walked into Dominic Thorne's private office, exuding the same calm, confident demeanor he had maintained for years. To anyone else, he appeared untouchable, a man who had climbed the corporate ladder on charm, intellect, and, occasionally, ruthlessness. But today was different. Today, the air in the room was thick with tension, and Julian couldn't quite place why. Dominic sat behind his massive oak desk, hands clasped together. His usual commanding presence was tempered by something sharper: focus, determination, and an undercurrent of warning. He gestured for Julian to sit, but Julian hesitated, sensing something off. "Julian," Dominic began, his voice steady measured. "There are some discrepancies in the Foundation's accounts. I need to understand what happened." Julian's brow furrowed. "Discrepancies? I manage these accounts. Everything is standard procedure." Dominic leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Julian's. "Standard procedure doesn't explain these," he said, sliding a sealed folder across the desk. "These documents show unauthorized transfers, offshore accounts, and manipulations that only someone with full access could execute." Julian's confident facade wavered for just a moment. "I don't know what you mean," he replied, a hint of strain in his voice. Dominic's expression didn't change. "I think you do. And I also know that the person who uncovered this isn't just anyone." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Aaliyah Brooks." Julian froze. The name barely registered at first, but then reality struck. The waitress, the woman he had dismissed as uneducated and naive, was the same person who had been quietly analyzing every file, every transaction, and every hidden pattern, leaving nothing to chance. You mean her?" Julian stammered, incredulous. "The girl who works at the Gilded Plate? That's impossible." Dominic's gaze was unwavering. Nothing is impossible when someone has the mind and courage to see what others cannot. And she saw everything you tried to hide. Julian's pulse quickened. He had underestimated her, dismissing her as just another server, unaware that her intelligence and observational skills had outmatched him at every turn. Now, she had become the instrument of his exposure. Dominic opened the folder, revealing meticulously organized evidence, bank statements, transfer records, emails, and logs that traced every illicit action directly to Julian. The sheer volume and clarity of proof left no room for denial. Aaliyah, watching from a secure room across the hall via a live feed, observed Julian's reaction carefully. Every twitch, every flicker of doubt, every bead of sweat told a story. She had predicted his moves, anticipated his excuses, and prepared for his resistance. But nothing had prepared her for the look of panic that finally crossed his face. I can explain," Julian stammered, grasping at straws. "It wasn't supposed to be. I was just—" "You were just what?" Dominic's voice rose slightly, cutting through the excuses. "Greedy? Reckless? Deceptive?" Julian faltered. I had my reasons. I needed the money. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. Dominic shook his head slowly, disappointment mingling with anger. This isn't about justification. It's about betrayal. You knew the consequences, yet you chose deception. And now, because of your actions, the foundation and countless lives it supports could have been destroyed. Julian's bravado crumbled. He slumped in the chair, realization dawning that his carefully constructed facade was gone. The room, which had once been a battlefield of wits and charm, now echoed with the weight of truth. Aaliyah stepped forward, her presence commanding even through the video feed. Dominic allowed her to speak, knowing that her words would strike harder than any accusation he could deliver. Julian, Aaliyah began, her voice calm, precise, and unwavering, you underestimated people based on appearances. You thought that a waitress, a scholar in training, could not see what you were doing. You were wrong. Intelligence and courage are not defined by wealth, status, or titles. You chose to betray, and now you must face the consequences. Julian's face paled. The confidence that had once carried him through boardrooms and high-profile deals evaporated under her scrutiny. He looked at her as if she were some force of nature, unrelenting, precise, and unstoppable. Dominic finally spoke again, his voice low but resolute. You will resign immediately, return the stolen funds, and cooperate fully with the authorities. Anything less, and legal action will follow. Do you understand? Julian swallowed hard, knowing there was no escape. Yes, I understand, he murmured. Aaliyah's eyes softened just slightly. She had no desire to humiliate unnecessarily. Her goal had always been justice, not vengeance. Yet, she knew that this lesson had to be felt deeply, not merely enforced through legal channels. Dominic nodded toward the live feed monitor. Aaliyah, you've done more than uncover fraud. You've restored integrity and reminded us all of the value of courage and intellect. I can't thank you enough. Aaliyah gave a small smile, humility in her eyes. Thank you, Dominic. But it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what was right. The days that followed were tense, yet transformative. Julian Harris stepped down, the stolen funds were recovered, and the foundation's reputation remained intact. Media inquiries were handled carefully, ensuring that the story highlighted transparency, justice, and the brilliant intervention of someone unexpected, a young black woman who had refused to be underestimated. Aaliyah's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. From waitress to scholar to investigator, she had proven that courage, intelligence, and integrity could triumph over greed, arrogance, and betrayal. But beyond the accolades and recognition, the most profound change was in Dominic Thorne. The billionaire, who had once dismissed her as uneducated, now looked at her with a mixture of respect, admiration, and genuine awe. He had witnessed firsthand that true brilliance often comes from most unexpected places, and that humility and heart were as powerful as intellect and wealth combined. And for Aaliyah, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had not only exposed corruption, but had changed the course of someone's life, including her own, by standing firm, speaking truth, and trusting in her abilities. As she walked through the Foundation's offices for the first time since the confrontation, Aaliyah felt a sense of purpose deeper than any she had known before. She had earned her place not through privilege, not through luck, but through sheer determination, courage, and intellect, qualities that no one could take from her, not even a billionaire, not even betrayal, not even fear. Little did she know, the events that had begun in a crowded restaurant with a simple exchange of words in 5 languages would ripple outward, touching lives, inspiring change, and setting the stage for an even greater challenge that neither she nor Dominic could have anticipated. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The week after Julian Harris's downfall, Aaliyah walked through the Foundation's sleek, modern offices with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had gone from serving tables at a restaurant to navigating complex financial networks, exposing a high-profile embezzler, and earning the respect of a billionaire whose name alone commanded influence worldwide. Yet, despite all the recognition, she remained grounded, remembering, uneducated, and how far she had come since. Dominic Thorne entered the office just as she was reviewing the final audit report. His expression was softer than she had ever seen, less of the sharp, commanding titan the world knew, and more human. Vulnerable, yet respectful, almost reverent. "Aaliyah," he said, walking toward her, "I've been meaning to tell you something. You've done more than save the Foundation. You've reminded me of something I forgot long ago. Power without purpose is meaningless. Intelligence without courage is wasted. And wealth without integrity, well, that's dangerous." Aaliyah looked up, meeting his gaze. There was no arrogance now, no condescension. Just sincerity. Thank you, Dominic. But I didn't do this for praise. I did it because it was right. Dominic nodded, a faint smile breaking through. And yet, the world should know. You've inspired people more than you realize. Not just the staff, not just me, but hundreds who will hear about this story. You've shown that one person, standing firm, can change everything. For a moment, Aaliyah felt a flicker of uncertainty. She had always valued humility, and recognition was foreign, almost uncomfortable. But Dominic continued, his voice gentle yet firm. There's one more thing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, elegantly wrapped box. Consider this a symbol. Not of wealth or status, but of potential and the recognition of someone who truly earned it. Aaliyah carefully unwrapped the box. Inside was a beautiful, custom-made necklace with a small pendant in the shape of an open book intertwined with a globe, a subtle nod to knowledge, exploration, and her journey. Attached was a note, written in Dominic's handwriting. To Aaliyah Brooks, whose courage, intellect, and heart have changed more than you know. Wear this as a reminder that true greatness comes from within. Tears blurred her vision. She clasped the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight not just of the gold, but the journey it represented. The late nights, the risks, the courage to speak in 5 languages to silence arrogance, and the tireless determination to uncover the truth. Dominic watched her quietly. Then, after a pause, he said softly, "There's one more thing you should know. I didn't just choose you because of intellect. I chose you because I saw honesty and resilience, qualities I thought I'd lost sight of in this world. You reminded me why I do what I do, and why I need to do it better." Aaliyah smiled faintly, touched by his words. "I think everyone needs reminders sometimes, even billionaires." A small laugh escaped him, a rare, genuine sound. And in that moment, she realized the irony. The billionaire who had once insulted her was now personally invested in her growth and success, inspired by her strength, courage, and unwavering integrity. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The media highlighted her role in exposing the embezzlement, framing her not as a mere waitress, but as a symbol of courage, intelligence, and justice. Social media erupted with admiration for the woman who had spoken truth to a billionaire and solved the high-stakes corporate mystery. Headlines celebrated her bravery, interviews showcased her intellect, and through it all, she remained humble, always emphasizing the values that had guided her: courage, honesty, and perseverance. Yet the story's most profound impact was personal. Dominic and Aaliyah developed a deep bond, not romantic, though undeniably connected by mutual respect and shared trials, but a partnership founded on trust, admiration, and recognition of one another's strengths. He became a mentor, not a patron, a collaborator, not a superior. And she, in turn, taught him that humility and empathy were as crucial to leadership as strategy and wealth. One evening, as they reviewed a new initiative for the foundation, Dominic looked up, eyes thoughtful. "You know, I used to think that success meant accumulating power and wealth. But watching you, I've realized it's about impact. It's about the people you lift along the way." Aaliyah smiled. "And sometimes, the people you least expect end up teaching you the most." Dominic nodded, a small chuckle escaping him. "I underestimated you once, but you've taught me more in few weeks than I've learned in decades." The foundation's work flourished, aided by Aaliyah's insights and relentless dedication. She helped implement programs to empower underprivileged youth, scholarships for aspiring scholars, and initiatives to promote education globally. And while her life had changed dramatically, from waitress to international scholar and strategist, she never forgot her roots. She still remembered the late nights working shifts, the challenges she had faced, and the resilience that had carried her through. Then came the final, heart-stirring twist. Aaliyah received a letter from her hometown school announcing a scholarship fund in her name for students with potential but limited resources. The school praised her courage, intellect, and determination, noting that her story inspired countless young minds to dream bigger and believe in themselves. As she read the letter, tears filled her eyes. She realized that her journey had come full circle, from being underestimated, dismissed, and even insulted, to inspiring others, changing the life of a billionaire, and creating opportunities for future generations. Dominic entered the room, observing her quietly. "You've done something remarkable," he said softly. "Not just for the foundation, not just for me, but for everyone who will hear your story. You've proven that courage, intelligence, and integrity can overcome even the most entrenched arrogance and corruption. Aaliyah smiled, placing the necklace over her heart. I only hope that my story reminds people, especially young girls like me, that no one is too small, too uneducated, or too overlooked to make a difference. Every voice matters. Every choice matters. And every act of courage matters. Dominic nodded, eyes glistening. And I've learned a lesson I'll never forget. Never underestimate someone based on appearances, background, or station in life. True brilliance reveals itself in action, not titles. Aaliyah's heart swelled. She had come a long way, from a young waitress silenced by arrogance to a woman who commanded respect, shaped outcomes, and touched countless lives. And the most remarkable realization? She hadn't just changed her own life, she had changed the lives of everyone around her, including one of the wealthiest men in the world. As she walked out of the foundation offices that evening, the sun setting behind the skyline, Aaliyah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had tested her courage, her intellect, and her heart, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she smiled, knowing that the woman who had once been called uneducated had not only silenced a billionaire, she had inspired a world.